All right, so welcome. We have the recording going now. We're at our home screen. One of the things I wanted to share with you guys is I had missed some of your postings on the discussions, and I think now I've gone through and I've seen everybody's discussion posts. I've had a chance to comment on those. I have a few things I need to finish up on your grades. So I'll work on that this afternoon so your grades will be up to date on Canvas. Remember, if you're on Canvas, I'm going to put on my student mode so you guys can see the screen. It's got this pink border around it. Um, if you click your grades tab, it should give you an update on your grades and what have you done, what have you not done, and it should list everything that's there. There's some stuff that, like I shared just a second ago, that I need to go in there and manually grade. And so I'll get caught up on that this afternoon, because for a few of you guys, there are some assignments that I need to get caught up on. But yeah, so that's one of the places where you go to check that out. The other thing I like about this is if you go to the Canvas homepage over on the right hand side over here, and we'll just get a little annotation tool going there on the right hand side to let you know what assignments do I have to do. So that's a quick and easy way to see, well, what do I need to be working on? Okay. So with that, I hope you take advantage of those tools to kind of keep yourself moving forward in this class. There's definitely something I don't want you to procrastinate too long on, in that we do have some hands-on projects coming up, and the sooner you get started on those, the better, because then I can help you with that stuff if you need. And inevitably, as you go to work on your projects, just like this guy in the picture right there, um, you're going to run into some problems, and that's part of the nature of just being a mechanic or a technician or somebody that's working on stuff. It never goes as easy as it does, on a video or on TV or what somebody posted on YouTube. It's always a little harder than it looks, and there's always some little problem that you get into. If you do a project and you run into zero problems, consider yourself lucky. Go buy some lottery tickets that day, because you got some luck with you, because almost always you will run into some type of problem as you go on to work on stuff. And as you build experience, you kind of figure out ways to overcome those problems, and you'll see the same issues over and over again, whether that's stripped out bolts or rusted items, or you modify a tool to gain access to a point. But anyway, so the sooner you get working on your hands-on projects, I think the better, because then I can kind of help you through that process. So related to that, let's give you some more background information. And what I'm going to do is clear out these scribbles, and we're going to go over to this other tab where I have some animations coming up. Now, remember that all of our small engines, we've called them internal combustion engines. That's because we're burning the air-fuel mixture. We're burning it on the inside of the engine, right? An example of an external combustion engine would be get my clicker back, a steam engine. Okay. So again, this is off of CDX, which is an automotive, well, we'll call it a textbook, but really it's a learning management platform. So it's a book and multimedia and all kinds of stuff that we use for the majority of our automotive classes here at American River College. I really enjoy these animations that it has. And so a steam engine is external combustion because you had a fire here on the outside, and that, boiled water, it turned it into steam, and then we directed the steam inside the engine to move pistons back and forth. So an old steam locomotive is a good example of an external combustion engine. But that's not what we're going to have. We are going to have 4-cycle engines, and these were this 4-stroke cycle design, as we talked about before, was created by Nicholas Otto well over 100 years ago now, back in the 1800s. And, you know, it's the mainstay engine that we use today. Now, this is an automotive graphic. So what we see on this graphic is a very sophisticated late model engine, right? But the 4 strokes are the same: intake, compression, power, exhaust. So if I can get this thing queued up on where I want it, it's doing power stroke right now. That's what's actually moving us down the road or mowing our grass or. All right, so I'm pausing that thing right on the intake stroke. And what you'll notice here is there's a couple things going on. First of all, the intake valve is open and I'm bringing air into the engine, okay? Now, a typical small engine is carbureted, so we would have a carburetor mixing the air and fuel up here. This is a more modern engine in this graphic, so we have an electronic fuel injector instead, where the fuel injector gets commanded open by the computer. He sprays, I changed that color, he sprays fuel in the intake port that mixes with the incoming air, and we have a intake charge mixture of air and fuel. Now, today I said I was going to start relating this to the fuel systems. For a gasoline engine, an engine that's burning gasoline as its fuel, we want approximately somewhere around a 15-to-1 air fuel mixture. And so that would be for 15 pounds, I can write that, of air for every 1 pound of fuel. So I guess I should change it to my text tool here and write air and fuel. Okay, so we bring in a lot more air than we bring in fuel. Now, a small engine being air cooled, that usually means that we have to run a little bit more fuel. And it seems weird, but the fuel actually helps cool the engine. So if you've ever been putting gas in your small engine or something and you spilled some gas on your hands, right? Well, one, you should wash your hands when you're done, right? That's not super good for the health of your skin and everything. But the thing that you might have noticed is that when you spilled gas on your hand, it got cold. As the fuel evaporated away, it pulled heat with it. So extra fuel will help cool the engine and cool the combustion. And so a small engine usually runs a little richer air fuel mixture. So I have an air fuel mixture of 15-to-1. So every 15 pounds of air that the engine would ingest, we would ingest 1 pound of fuel with that. And that's what a typical car would run. Actually, they run more like 14.7-to-1. That's their ideal ratio, stoichiometric ratio. A small engine might run more on the neighborhood of 13, maybe 13.5-to-1 as far as an air fuel mixture. And again, why would we do that? Because it will help the engine run a little cooler. Emissions wise, it actually runs cleaner if we run a little bit less fuel. So I need to put up a couple other terms on my graphic here. I'm going to put lean up here, and down here I'm going to put the word rich. And we'll draw on that a little bit as well. So if I go lean, we're going to say it's more air. That is a simple way to look at it. And if we go to the rich end of the spectrum, we're going to say more fuel. I can write that. So, and typical air-cooled small engine that you'd use in outdoor power equipment, usually even like a off-road motorcycle or ATV, it's going to run a little bit on the richer side. It's not going to run 14.7 to 1. It's usually going to run somewhere around maybe the 14s to 13s as far as an air-fuel ratio. But anyways, we mix that air and fuel together. We bring it into the engine on the intake stroke. So let me clear out those scribbles, and we're going to get this graphic moving again. So about that time the intake valve closes, we start squeezing the air-fuel mixture into a tighter and tighter spot. And this is super important because it helps us mix up the air and fuel really well. It helps us to heat it up and get it ready to combust. The fuel that we bring into our engine, it can't be burned in a liquid state. It has to be burned in a gaseous state. So we have to get the liquid fuel that's either sprayed in by a fuel injector, like is drawn in on this graphic, or is brought in by that carburetor. It has to be turned into a vapor. And so by compressing it, it helps heat it up, it helps mix it up, it helps turn it into a vapor, and it helps get it ready, get it primed to light up. Also, what happens is if I squeeze the air-fuel mixture into a tighter and tighter area here, tighter and tighter area, when I burn it, I will get a greater amount of expansion from that. So the more I compress it, the more expansion I can get out of it, and it's that expansion that gives us our power, okay? So another way to look at this would be to say, if I compress the air-fuel mixture more, I can get more power out of my engine. And that's what we call our compression ratio. And we did talk about this last week, but since I have this on this graphic, this little volume right here, I'm drawing with the black square, that would be my clearance volume with the piston all the way up at top dead center. And if I change my colors here, I'll change it to maybe a pink or something, will show it really good, to all this volume down here, right? The compression ratio is a ratio between the total volume of the cylinder versus the clearance volume. So if this was, I don't know, let's say 8 cubic inches, and this little clearance volume, I better make him a different color. He was only 1 cubic inch. We could say that we have a compression ratio of 8 to 1. A small engine is usually going to have a lower compression ratio. So for instance, like a flathead or L-head engine, it might be 6.5 to 1. As we get to overhead valve engines, we might get up to 7 to 8 to 1. An automotive engine, like on this graphic, these days is likely going to have 9.5 to maybe 10.5 to 1 compression ratio, because we have so much better computer controls that can manage the right air-fuel mixture, that can fire the spark plug at the right time. And so because we can control the engine much more precisely, we can bump up those compression ratios. And that means we can bump up the power from the engine. Of course, we're also not having to pull this thing with a pull starter by hand. And so that takes that issue away as well, and enables us to have a higher compression ratio. So compression stroke is really important, and that relates to the compression pressures that we would measure on a compression gauge, right? Okay, so we'll clear out those scribbles and we'll get it going one more time. So notice both valves are closed, and they remain closed through the power stroke as we push the piston down. And right about the bottom of the power stroke, we start to open up that exhaust valve. And as soon as the exhaust valve opens up, those exhaust gases are under a lot of pressure in that cylinder. So as soon as the valve opens up, they start to go past that valve and out our exhaust system, out through our muffler, past a catalytic converter, if you had one. And I will circle this thing because a lot of small engines now are starting to have little catalytic converters on them. The CAT's job, we'll call it CAT for short, its job is to burn up emissions that the engine doesn't burn up on its own, okay? So it's kind of like an emissions Band-Aid, right? Any fuel that the engine didn't burn or didn't burn completely, the CAT's going to try to burn that up, okay? Any unwanted smog, if you will, the CAT's going to try to take care of those things, so what's coming out the tailpipe is nice and clean. Of course, the dirtier that the engine runs, the more work the CAT has to do. And that's why if your engine is running poorly, you can burn up your catalytic converter in short order. Whether it was a small engine that had a little tiny catalytic converter on there, or it was your passenger car. If you were driving down the road and let's say one of the cylinders, the spark plug had failed and it was no longer sparking at the right time, and so the engine was misfiring, you'd be dumping all kinds of raw fuel in the CAT, and that would burn out that CAT in short order. So anyways, it's not outside the box anymore to have catalytic converters on small engines. In fact, I have some small engines that I got from Harbor Freight Tools that we used to modify and put those on go-karts and race them around, and those came from the factory with a catalytic converter on them. They even had an emissions label on them, much like a car. In fact, let's see if I can find something about that, because it's definitely worth looking at if you've never seen some of these components. There we go. All right, so I am going to change my screen share. Since we're sidetracked anyways, I'm going to change my screen share, and we're going to open up some pictures. Let's see if I can get that going. All right, and so this was the engine that they would sell at Harbor Freight Tools, roughly about, I don't know, 8 to 10 years ago. And now it's a Predator engine, but it's the same basic design. It's a copy of a Honda GX200 engine. So there's the box. One thing you'll notice on the box is it's got some labels that says it's CARB approved, California Air Resources Board approved. So that means it passes some emission standards there. Here's what the engine looks like. We'll get that screen share back up. On the side of the engine, there's a label, there's a sticker. If I can get so right here, you'll notice that there's a sticker. Let's look at that sticker real fast, and we'll get that on the screen share. And what you'll notice is that this is an emissions label. And this label tells you a lot about the engine, and we've had these on cars for years, but now we're seeing them on small engines. Okay, so this says, hey, it meets California emissions. It tells you what fuel, 87 octane, and for emission controls, it's got a three-way catalyst. That's what TWC means. It's got pulse air injection. Okay, and I can't quite make out. Oh, it's got an evap system. So it says exhaust emission controls, three-way cat pulse air injection, evap emission controls, and it's got a crankcase, sealed crankcase system. So this engine here, if I go back to, if I change images and I do a new share, this engine here kind of has the emission control devices on it that you would have found on a late 1970s or early 80s automobile. So to kind of give you a view of that. And so if I look at the exhaust system, what you'll see here is this thing looks like a muffler, but inside of it, it has a little catalytic converter element. And then it's got this gray, weird looking box thing. That's actually a pulse air injection, like a reed valve in the exhaust that would suck fresh air into this little catalytic converter to help it, again, burn any fuel or any partially burned fuel. It helped burn it up to get it to run cleaner. Now, small engine manufacturers don't really like putting catalytic converters on their engines. It makes the engine run hotter. Okay, because the cat gets hot in order to work and burn up those emissions. It adds a little bit of exhaust back pressure, and all that makes the engine run hotter. Plus, this cat costs money to put on the engine. And so not only does it cost money, but that money makes the engine cost a little bit more money when they go to sell it, right? So it doesn't really help the performance, and it makes the engine a little bit more expensive, but it does do a really good job of helping clean up emissions. So on some engine designs where they maybe are having a hard time meeting emission standards, they'll put that thing on there. Here's another view. I do another screen share here. Here's another view of that pulse air injection. And so what would happen if I draw this air to, let's say, bright blue, fresh air from outside when the engine's running would be drawn in to the exhaust system through that little valve there, that little pulse air injection valve. That would mix with hot exhaust gases that were coming out of the engine inside this cat. It would then help burn that stuff up, and you would get clean exhaust gases coming out. So I got one other little thing to show you as far as pictures and emission controls on this engine. And we will change that screen share to show that. And that is this right here. This little box looking thing is an evaporative emission canister, or your Evap canister. And so what you'll notice on this guy is he has a couple lines that go to like the air cleaner area and go to the carburetor. And basically any fuel vapors that would normally evaporate out of your gas tank or off your carburetor, they will be stored in this little canister. And then when you're running the engine, it will suck them back through the intake and back into the engine and burn them. Okay, so don't be surprised if you go to work on a small engine, especially a newer one, to see it has some emission control devices on it. Okay, and so that was the emission controls off of a Honda clone, a copy of a Honda. Most of those come out of China, but they got the Honda design and modified it slightly and made it their own, I guess. And you know, it's an engine that you could put on a piece of power equipment as a replacement engine. What we used to do, if and I know one of the students in the class, because I was going through the projects and comments, they were interested in building a go-kart and putting an engine on it. This would make a good engine for your average kind of fun kart. If I, so here we're, change my screen share. Here we've taken off the fuel tank and some covers, and we're removing some of those emission control devices. This arm right here that I will highlight, this is the governor arm, governor lever, and throttle link assembly. That gets removed, and when we're all done with this engine, it ends up looking like this. And it made about, it went from rated at 6.5 horsepower. I don't know what it really made, but it goes up to making about 9.5 horsepower, which is a pretty big improvement. By, you know, rejetting the carburetor, putting a good high flow air filter on there, and a better exhaust system. And actually this little exhaust, maybe that engine was making 8.5 horsepower or something at that time. I can't remember exactly. It had a little chain guard and cover, and that little thing at the top is a fuel pump. And then from this slide, you can see the centrifugal clutch that was put on there. Again, chain guard and stuff. So that would be a good little engine to put together. Now, I don't know if you can see the little logos on the guards, but there's a company back east called ARC Racing. No relation to American River College, just happens to have the same letters, ARC Racing, where you can get all those little cool trick bits and parts to modify your engine and make it acceptable. We'll put in a goat cart or something. So anyways, side note on emission controls, let's change our screen share back to the internet. And what I am going to do is I got 100 different photos I got to close. So I'm just taking a minute to close some of those things so my computer doesn't slow down to a crawl here. Okay, so we're on our exhaust stroke and we're pushing those burnt exhaust gases, right? The air fuel mixture that we now burned, we've harnessed the power from it, we're pushing it out the exhaust. We might push that out past the catalytic converter or not. And then when we finish up that exhaust stroke, we do it all over again, don't we? We come back up, finish the exhaust, and we go back over on that intake stroke, and we do this over and over and over again. And this 4-stroke cycle engine takes 2 revolutions to make the 4-stroke cycle happen. But you'll notice that, each cycle has its own dedicated sweep of the piston. And so it inherently makes this design run a little cleaner than other engine designs. And that's why, by and large, it's the mainstay of, our engines, internal combustion engines in use today, whether it's in your car or your pickup truck or, your lawnmower. With this engine design, if you understand this concept of intake compression power exhaust, we have to do these 4 events on every other engine design. We have to bring the air fuel mixture in, we have to compress it, then we get to burn it, right? Harness that power from it, and then we got to push it out of there. We have to exhaust it out and start the process over again. So the intake compression power exhaust, all those events or phases have to happen in any internal combustion engine design. All right. So clear out my drawing. So I don't care if it's a diesel engine or rotary engine, those 4 things have to happen. We're gonna double click on our 2-stroke engine design though, so we can compare this to a 2-stroke engine. And this again is a pretty neat little graphic. Now let me stop it right there. Let me back it up. Okay, so with the 2-stroke engine design, it's kind of a unique thing. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and move this thing down. I'm going to stop it at the bottom. Okay, and I'm going to label a couple things on here. Remember, when the piston is at the bottom of its stroke, we have a special name for that. And when the piston is at the top of its stroke, we have a special name for that. And so I'm going to put those up on the screen. I'm going to use my text tool. So I have BDC, or bottom dead center. At the top, I have TDC, or top dead center. And so I like to start describing the 2-stroke cycle with the piston at the bottom. or bottom dead center. So what happens is we're going to start over here. We're going to start moving up. And we're going to go on a compression and an intake. Then our second stroke is we're going to do power, I'll say going down. Now we're going to go on power and exhaust. But we're going to do something called transfer. Okay. So now I got those typed up. Let's check this out. So we're starting at bottom to center. We're going to start moving up. And as we start moving up, what happens here, if I pause it, is we are compressing the air-fuel mixture that was already on top of the piston, okay? So you gotta say, okay, there was already some air-fuel mixture on top of there and we're compressing it. So we're making pressure at the top from that compression, but as the piston moves up, what you may not have realized is, hey, this crankcase, this is sealed here on the bottom. And so what's happened here, if I look over on this side, I have my air cleaner, I have my carburetor, I have my throttle, I might have a reed valve here as shown here. And a reed valve is like a one-way check valve. It lets the air fuel mixture go in, but it doesn't let anything go back. So it's like a door that only opens one direction. So what happened is I made a high pressure at the top due to that compression, but I have a low pressure at the bottom. And so with that low pressure, then I can now draw in my air fuel mixture or my air past the air cleaner, mix some fuel with it, and bring it into the crankcase. But then you might be thinking, well, wait a minute, I got this crankshaft and connecting rod. I need to keep stuff lubricated, right? So a two-stroke engine design, I'm going to have to mix not only some fuel with that air going into the engine, but I got to mix some oil down here. I got to mix some oil in the bottom of the engine. And so what I end up with is a fuel, oil, and air mixture going in the bottom of the engine. And when I burn it, no matter what I do, I'm always going to be burning some oil with my air fuel mixture. So when it comes to two-cycle engines, one of their big challenges is going to be smog or emissions, because we're always going to be burning some oil. And what we end up with is more emissions from the tailpipe. Oops. More emissions from the tailpipe of a two-stroke engine, okay? So we went up, we compressed air fuel mixture on top of the piston, and we drew in air fuel mixture below the piston. So we're doing two things at once. I like to think of a two-cycle engine as a great multitasker. All right. So now that we got that stuff out of the way, and we got this air fuel mixture compressed, notice we still have a spark plug. And so right about top dead center, the spark plug fires, and we begin to burn the air fuel mixture. Okay, so we're going down now on, oops, I erased it, but we're going down right now on power and exhaust. So we get some power pushing the piston down, but as soon as I uncover this exhaust port, let me make that a different color. As soon as I uncover this exhaust port, exhaust gases here will start to flow out through the muffler. Okay, so we move the piston down, let's say halfway of its stroke, and then we uncover an exhaust port. And there's a lot more pressure inside the engine than there is outside the engine. So as soon as we open up that port, guess what? Exhaust gases flow out through the exhaust port, through the muffler, and out into the air. Okay, so one thing you'll notice is there's no valves in this engine, there's no camshafts. It's a lot simpler engine. It's a lot more compact. That also makes it a lot lighter. So for something like a chainsaw, it's awesome because it can, make a lot of power in a small compact size, and it can be nice and light. And those are all things that I want in an engine that I'm holding in my hands the whole time. So we do power stroke, pushing the piston down, and exhaust. We do those at the same time. But we also do another thing that I called transfer. And what's this transfer deal? Well, if I erase that, I get this playing in, goes down to bottom dead center, and what you'll see is as he starts getting to the bottom, what's happening now is that the piston is compressing the air, fuel, and oil mixture that's in the bottom of the crankcase. And so as the piston moves down on that power and exhaust stroke, it starts to squeeze the air, fuel mixture, and oil mixture on the bottom, and it comes up through a transfer port or passageway and is discharged through a transfer port. And that's how it gets on top of the piston. And so you can see on this graphic between the red moving out, the exhaust moving out, and the blue moving in, you'll also notice that, the reed valve closes to prevent air fuel mixture from leaving the engine. So we take advantage of both sides of the crankcase, if you will, above the piston and below the piston. As the piston's moving down, it's then pushing the air fuel mixture over, and that's how it gets to the top of the piston or above the piston top there. You'll notice that this piston is shaped in such a fashion to help direct the incoming air fuel mixture over here and to try to help prevent it from just going right out the exhaust. Okay, but if I make my animation go a little bit more, one thing you'll see is that no matter how I try, I always end up with a little bit of air fuel mixture that a lot of times will just squirt out the exhaust there. It'll just pull through. And again, what does that do? Well, that hurts the emissions because I have some raw fuel and oil that just goes right out the exhaust and doesn't get burned at all. So just some raw hydrocarbons coming out the exhaust. It also makes this engine design not real good for fuel economy. So a two-stroke engine design, I don't know if you were counting everything, but it does its whole deal in an upstroke and a downstroke. So that means the whole cycle only takes one, it's supposed to be a circle with an arrow, one revolution of the crankshaft, and the whole thing happens. So, pound for pound, this thing makes a lot of power, a lot of power being applied to the crankshaft. So it's a lightweight, powerful, high revving engine because I don't have to open and close valves and I have less moving parts in the engine. So it's simple, it's light, it's powerful for its size, all those things. Again, a string trimmer, a chainsaw, that's really, really good. And back in the day, even for like off-road motorcycles, two strokes reigned supreme because they were lightweight, and that allowed you to have a lighter handling, a lighter motorcycle that handled better. And they still are probably the engine of choice if you're somebody who rides in like tight woods or over tight obstacles and you want a nice and light motorcycle. that's the best engine design for that. But fuel economy is bad and emissions are bad. Some of the fuel that you put in your tank just goes right out the exhaust. You also have to mix oil with that fuel, unless it has some type of automatic like oil injection pump. But oil has to be mixed with the fuel, and because we have some fuel that's just being pulled out the exhaust, it ends up being poor on emissions. And so those are the things that hurt it. But a great engine design, a super simple engine design with less moving parts. One thing to think about is the bottom of the crankcase needs to be perfectly sealed. That will affect the air fuel mixture if the crankcase isn't sealed. Whereas on a 4-cycle engine, if my crankcase wasn't sealed, maybe I would have an oil leak, but I wouldn't, it wouldn't affect the way the engine really runs. This will affect the way the engine runs. If you've ever had a 2-cycle engine and maybe it was hard to start, maybe you just couldn't get it to run right, you've replaced the carburetor, you put a new piston and ring on there, new spark plug, and you're going crazy, you might have been fighting a case leak. So, and that's something that's a video clip I need to make, demonstrating what a case leak would be on a 2-cycle engine. All right, so now we've beat you to death with the 4-stroke cycle and the 2-stroke cycle. Hopefully you're feeling better about those, but I know that, that my ramblings don't necessarily help everybody. And so where we can make up the difference now is we have some more resources. So shortly after our class last Wednesday, I finally received word back from Stihl and got in touch with the right person that handles the School of Accounts. And we got the new and improved Stihl iAcademy up. So we moved away from the Votech website. And I guess Votech is kind of an older term. As I get older, I'm finding myself being more old school. So I kind of like Votech. But anyways, so now it's the iCademy, right? And so when you guys get logged in here, and again, if you haven't gotten logged in yet, if you're having problems, email me and we can get you set up. But I try to make an account for everybody that was active in our class. You'll get logged in and you'll get to this main page. And you're not going to necessarily have this tab here that says Manage Students, but you should have this tab that says Learner Home. And so if I click that tab, I can get to all the cool stuff that we're going to be wanting to get to. So there's some classes that kind of show you how the iAcademy works. That's this one right here. I've registered up for the technician Votech training pathway. But the other thing you can do is go right here to the search bar and search up for what you want. So one of the certifications we were just talking about is how engines work. So I'm going to just search engine, and it's got all kinds of stuff here. Okay, but one of the ones is this engine principles of operation. This is one of our requirements. You can see that I've already done it, but I wanted to show you how this works. So if I go over here to launch, this part's basically the same as it always was. I got to change my screen share so you guys can see it. Oh, and I better hit restart because I was probably at the end of that training. So what it essentially is a series of PowerPoint slides. So not maybe super exciting, but they do have some cool animations in the PowerPoint slides. So for instance, we were just talking about the 4-stroke cycle and then the 2-stroke cycle. And so they show us some images. You know what? These images look like they're right out of our Briggs and Stratton textbook, don't they? And they label the parts and kind of walk you through. What I did notice on the new site is when I get to a video clip, I have to watch the whole video clip until I see the next thing. And I wish it was, you know, narrated or something, and it's not, but it is pretty cool. Now I can hit next and go to the next thing, right? Here's a little two-stroke engine right here. This is what you'd have on like a string trimmer. This is a piston port two-stroke. There's no reed valves. And you can see the, if I label some parts, you can see the crankshaft here. You can see the main bearings. Notice they're roller bearings. I have less lubrication in a two-stroke engine, so that means I have to have better bearings. I have my connecting rod, my piston. This piston has 2 rings on it. Notice that there's no oil control ring because it's a two-stroke engine. Here's my intake port right there, and my exhaust port will be over there. And I will say that on a two-stroke engine, they'll put markings on the piston for its correct orientation. You guys can't probably see this on the video, but if I looked at the top of the piston, I might notice that has an arrow that points to the exhaust port, or it might say IN, and that means that side of the piston points to the intake side. We'll clear those drawings. So again, there's a reed valve versus a piston port, and they do a pretty good job of going over the cycles, and again, they have the animations. When you get to the end of the training, you're able to take a certification test. And what I like about that certification test is that they don't let you get the wrong answer. They're going to keep taking you back to these different slides until you read through the slide and figure out, oh, okay, this is the right answer here. Notice that here we have some different transfer ports designs to make the engine run cleaner or more efficiently. So that's been a lot of progress there. And I will say that this is a pretty cool one right here. The reason I wanted to show you this presentation is I wanted to talk about this. The guys at Stihl, this is pretty darn neat, right? We know now that one of the problems with the 2-cycle engine is that some of the air-fuel mixture that's going on top of the piston is just going to be drawn right out the exhaust. So with this stratified charge engine design, what you have in its design is you have one carburetor port here that just brings fresh air into the engine. The other one I'll draw as another color actually mixes some fuel with the air. And so what they do is they first bring in some air and kind of purge out gases, and then they bring in the air-fuel mixture that they get ready to burn. So it's almost like there's 2 stages in the transfer ports, and it has an extra like barrel, if you will, of the carburetor that only handles air. Super smart design. So what happens is we bring in air in one port, we bring in our air-fuel mixture in the other port, and we basically stage it. If I can pause it at the right time, everything happens pretty quickly in a 2-stroke, so that we end up with a little puff of clean air that has no fuel oil mixture in it to help us purge out the exhaust gases before we then bring in our air fuel oil mixture that's gone through the carburetor. And so that's that stratified scavenging engine. Stratified means the combustion is in layers, or in layers if you think of stratified. And it helps have a little purge pulse, if you will, in between exhaust events, or in between events of the engine, to enable that engine to run cleaner and still be a 2-stroke design. Really, really ingenious. Just, super smart, great design. Cool way to go. I don't know how it affects the power of the engine, but it's certainly a neat way to go. All right. So again, I can't go to the next slide until I play this entire animation, which is a little frustrating. The other engine design that is becoming more popular especially for things like backpack leaf blowers, is what they call their four-mix design. Now, here we have a little four-stroke cycle engine. Okay, it's got rocker arms, it's overhead valves, and they'll call it a four-mix. They'll call it a four-mix. It's basically a four-stroke cycle engine. So I'll put four-mix. It's a four-stroke cycle engine that uses two-stroke gas oil mixture. Okay, so pretty neat design. So what do you get from that? Well, you get an engine that, because it's a four-stroke, it runs a little cleaner because I have dedicated strokes to each event in the engine, right? So it runs cleaner. It does weigh a little bit more, but to keep the weight down, I'll just mix a little oil with the fuel. And so that I don't have to have like 2 quarts of oil in the crankcase. I can just mix a little bit of oil with the fuel. So that helps me keep the weight increased to a minimum. I get some of the benefits of the engine running cleaner because it's a four-stroke design. Yeah, I'm going to lose a little bit of high-end horsepower, but I'm going to end up with a cleaner running engine that doesn't weigh that much more. Okay, and so for a long time they called this the four-mix engine design. So it's kind of a combination of four-cycle engine with the two-stroke lubrication plan, where we're bringing in air, fuel, oil mix in the bottom of the crankcase. Again, super smart design. That's pretty neat, and it's a way for them to make their engines meet emission standards without putting on catalytic converters and that type of thing. So this last one here, this delayed scavenging, what they're basically doing is playing around with the ports and the shapes and all that stuff to try to make it act like that stratified charge, but without having the extra complexity of a separate port system, bringing in fresh air mixture into the engine. So it's almost like they built a stratified charge engine that ended up being a little cheaper to produce. So this is kind of a newer design. So this slide didn't used to be on this presentation, but it's careful placement of the ports to get a little bit of pressure and stuff to get it to do what you want it to do to make that engine run a little bit cleaner. Good comparison of two-stroke and four-stroke. Nice little summary. And then ultimately, you have your test. And so I wanted to get to the test and just say, okay, well, if I do something wrong, it's going to cycle me back around. So in a four-stroke engine, on the intake stroke, I'm supposed to select the correct response. So we know on the intake stroke, piston starts moving down, intake valve opens up, allowing fresh air fuel mixture to enter the engine, right? So intake valve is open, piston is moving down the cylinder, okay? So that's going to be my right answer here, but I'm purposely going to pick the wrong one. I'm going to say both valves are closed. And I'm going to click submit. And it's going to say, nope, look at this slide, buddy. Read this thing again. You're getting it wrong. And then I have to click try again, and I got to keep going. Again, if I get it wrong again, it's going to keep cycling me back until I figure it out. So pretty neat. Now you go, well, that's super easy, right? Yeah, that's super easy. Stihl has 3 different levels of certification. They have their bronze. I guess I should do that color. They have their bronze. They have their, if I can, I don't know, change colors here, silver. And they have, oops, somehow I lost my bronze, but they also have a gold. And you can't see that. Anyways, bronze, silver, and gold. you might be thinking, hey, this seems really easy. Well, that's because it's the bronze level, so they're not going to give away the silver or the gold that easy. To get silver or gold certified, you'd have to be employed by a Stihl dealer and go to their hands-on training and pass certification tests that are considerably stronger or harder to pass. So you have to be stronger in your knowledge to get those passed. Anyway, so different way to do their training versus Briggs and Stratton will let you be master certified through their online platform. However, the Briggs and Stratton questions are a lot harder, and they don't just spoon feed you the answers. They make you work for it. And so if you're going to take those Briggs and Stratton MST tests, you might be taking those over and over and over again and studying to really get that information learned inside and out. So two different companies, two different ways to do their certifications, two different thought processes, if you will. You know, and I can see advantages of each one. So we went through the Stihl engine module. I'm going to clear out those scribbles. We're going to change our screen share back. And that allowed us to see how that Stihl iAcademy worked. If I click Stihl iAcademy, again, I get back to the main page. I'm going to click Learner Home. And one that I think is super important that's coming up on fuels, I'm going to just search fuel. And what I will get is this one that says ethanol in today's fuel. And of course, I've already completed this training, but you can see that there's some training on here I haven't completed, right? There's just all kinds of new training additions that they've added to their site, which is really cool. That you can use to get more knowledge. So you guys have access to all this stuff. And that's really, really, really neat. So if I open up this one and I do a new screen share, you can see it's kind of the same thing with a PowerPoint presentation. Now, some of these other trainings could be a little series of video clips. Why am I bringing up this one? This is really important. The gasoline that you would buy at your pumps here in California, where we're at, are largely going to be E10. That means 10% of that gasoline is really an ethanol compound. So it's a little bit of ethanol in there. You might have heard of E85, that's 85% ethanol. But your regular gasoline at the pump, and I don't care if it's 87, 89, or 91 octane, is E10 or 10% ethanol. The idea being is that helps the fuel burn a little bit cleaner. And I've actually done some experiments in some of my classes that I teach at the college. I teach an alternative fuels class where I actually burn the gasoline and we film it and stuff. And you'll see that, you know, the students in that class see that, hey, the ethanol does burn considerably cleaner. It also means that you're kind of like thinning out your fuel with some ethanol. And so that means you need less crude oil. So it's a way to kind of rely less on crude oil and maybe give our farmers some more work to do as they can grow different crop stocks, whether it's corn or something else, to make that ethanol. The downside of this is that ethanol is not really good on our fuel system components. It deteriorates our fuel lines, our diaphragms in our carburetors. An engine like pictured here would have a diaphragm style carburetor. It deteriorates those things. It you know, can gum stuff up and just ruin a lot of those rubber components over time. And so you really want to drain that gasoline out of there at the end of the year. You really don't want to leave it in there. And you got to remember that this is going to have more wear and tear on your rubber components. Now, I do want to bring out one other thing, is that Stihl recommends a minimum of 89 octane fuel. So I like to think of the Stihl products as being a little bit higher performance some of the other brands, and because I need a little bit more performance out of the engine, they're going to require a little bit higher octane rating of the fuel. So they recommend 89 octane fuel in their equipment. And this training goes on and gives you a lot of the precautions about that ethanol that's in the fuel. Okay. The other thing ethanol does, it runs cleaner, but it also leans out the air fuel mixture, because the fuel now actually has extra oxygen in it. And I won't get into that for hours on hours, but essentially affects the air fuel ratio a little bit. And because an engine in our chainsaw, for that matter, is not likely to be computer controlled with an oxygen sensor that can automatically adjust its air fuel ratio based on what fuel's in there and what's going on, that can lead to some issues and may require like carburetor adjustments. If it's 10% or less, we should be fine. But if you got over 10%, that can lead to some failures. So anyways, drain your fuel out of your products when you're done using them, or at least run some fuel stabilizers in them, is a safe way to go. And when you get a chance to do this training, it's got some good resources in there. Okay, I'm going to change my screen share. And I just wanted to show you guys some of the Stihl training, and that you could just search it out if nothing else, and that should get you go in the right direction. We did find out that the oils one had, they changed the name. Instead of like oil and lube, now it's just oils. I went ahead and fixed that assignment. So, and that again, that's a little bit different setup than what you had in the power channel. But what's neat is that you guys have access to all this great training from Briggs and Stratton and from Stihl. And so it covers both the 2-cycle stuff and the 4-cycle stuff. And the 2-cycle stuff, one of the big differences is they'll use a little bit different carburetors. So anyways, if I go back to my Zoom controls keep getting in the way. If I go back to my Briggs and Stratton basic, so at this point we've beat you to death with 4-cycle theory. We've been going over last week about compression. And there's a good set of video clips Briggs and Stratton has in there. And even things like last week, we talked about how there's a compression release mechanism. Briggs calls it the easy spin, but it basically senses speed. So at low speeds, it's going to bleed off compression. So speed sensing device, wait, that's not for the governor. Oh, that's the compression release system. Anyways, so we've been talking about some of those types of things. Where we're going next, though, in our class is the fuel systems section. And why is fuel system so important? Well, I mean, I talk about engines first, because I think you have to understand how an engine works. So you get that, hey, that engine needs a good mixture of air and fuel, right? But really, when we look at our problems that we have on small engines, I would say a good 75, maybe to 85% of the problems we have are usually fuel system related. And I wrote fuel related, but this could be from a gummed up carburetor that needs to be cleaned out, to bad, pump diaphragms and a diaphragm style carburetor, to all kinds of different things. But man, we have a lot of carburation problems today, and that deals with the ethanol that's in the fuel. And a lot of times people let their engines sit and they don't drain the fuel. The passages inside these carburetors for small engines are very, very small. And so the bulk of the drivability issues, the poor running issues that you're likely to experience on your small engine are going to be related to fuel system issues. Yeah, I mean, every once in a while you get, oh, this thing has low compression because they ran it and the air filter was torn and it sucked a bunch of dirt in there. Or it just has a million hours of use on it, right? Maybe you get a spark plug that's fouled out, okay? But maybe that's also fouled out because of a fuel system issue, right? So anyways, fuel system, lots of fuel system problems. So it's a super important area to learn about when you're studying small engines, with the thought that you're going to be working on diagnosing small engine problems. So what I would recommend you do is go to the power channel and start looking at, you know, these, this area, and going through all the different little video clips. Oops, I went back to the test. I should go back to the power channel course. Sorry, guys. And you can see that there's compression, ignition, carburetor. You know, I definitely would go through these video clips. And this is one that Briggs & Stratton has actually updated this one. And it's pretty good. They used to have a weatherman that was local to the Wisconsin area that went over this. This has some great animations, so they've really gone through and they've updated stuff. If I go back to those technical courses under the compression section, again, I would go through all these video clips. And my recommendation to you is, imagine that you're going through this video clip, but you're in class, and take notes, right? The things that they emphasize. Like if I go to this diagnosis video,
the need to maintain.
And you notice they have closed captions on them now, but the things that they emphasize, take notes on. Like this is a good one right here. They talk about, hey, if you have an engine that smokes on startup, that then the smoke goes away. Well, how is that thing stored? If they stored the engine like on its side, or it was in the back of the truck or something, here it's on some blocks of wood, that's going to make all the oil go up into the combustion chamber area of the engine. It's going to coat the top of the piston and the valves with oil, and it's going to make it smoke on startup. So what I would do as I watch these videos, guys, my recommendation to you is watch the video and take notes as you're watching the video. Then go through here and take the test. And when you take the test, you can take screenshots of the questions. You could, you know, I like to take this, print the page, and then make notes down as like, okay, what questions do I feel like I know really well, and what areas do I feel weak on? Okay, so for instance, that smoke that you saw on that video clip, it was kind of, to me, it was kind of like a grayish smoke. A lot of times I'll call it a blue-gray. To me, it looks blue, but that's an oil burn. Okay, when you have that gray smoke that kind of lingers in the air, that's burning oil. If I have a black smoke that dissipates quickly, that's going to be a rich fuel mixture. Anyways, watch the videos, try to make notes, maybe have a printout of the test questions in hand, and try to answer the questions as you watch the videos and get yourself ready to take these exams. So that's my recommendation for you guys as far as a strategy for taking those Briggs & Stratton certifications. And I think if you do that, you should have no problems passing these different Briggs & Stratton certification areas. So anyways, and some of these, you gotta read the question very, very closely. Like this last one here, this is one where you're like, oh, which of the following wings are on Briggs & Stratton? Oh, I could have just put, yeah, there's an oil control ring on there. But then I look really closely and it says, oh, select all that apply. Well, it has an oil control, it has a compression ring, it's got a wiper ring. So I would have to click those 3 boxes to get that question correctly, which is not how a lot of multi-choice test questions are, where you have to select multiple things to get the right answer. So make sure you read the questions very carefully. All right, so I just wanted to make sure that I gave you guys some good test taking tips for Briggs and Stratton and really talked about the engines in depth. We also got into a little bit of fuel system stuff today as we moved through our class, and we transitioned from compression and engines to fuel systems. So here we are right here on the 7th of July, and you can see that, yep, the topics for this week are still related to compression type work. Okay, in fact, our hands-on activity is the compression test, and we have a video for that. Again, if you don't have a compression gauge, you could get one from your local auto parts store and check it out. If you want to connect with me, I'll be back at the college tomorrow. You could come by the auto department. The parking lot A is open and unlocked, and we can check out a compression tester to you. So that'd be another way to get the tool that you need. I'll be there from 8 to 3. So that's kind of your first activity. Now, why do I have you do compression first? Because a normal diagnostic flow path would be, okay, I have a small engine here. I have to diagnose a poor running engine, or maybe an engine that doesn't run at all, right? Well, I'm going to do some basic checks first. Remember that an engine needs 3 things to run: heat, fuel, and air. The heat comes from our spark plugs, and compression. So what I would do, let me write a few other things here. And now I'll get my little drawing tool up here. What I would do, knowing that it needs heat, fuel, and air, the heat comes from spark and compression, right? So I would take my little spark tester and I would see if I have spark, and I would then do a compression test. Because if I don't have compression, well, it's game over. That's going to be a very expensive repair, right? The other thing I might do is just give it some fuel, spray a little starting fluid down the throat of the carburetor, and see if I can get it to run for a second on that. If I can get it to run for a second on that, then I know I have more of a fuel problem. But if I give it some starting fluid and it doesn't burp or try to run for a little bit on that fuel, then I'm okay, spark, compression. If it has spark, then I'm leading to compression. And so I'm always going to test for compression relatively early on my diagnosis, because if I have no compression, if I have a wiped out piston, that's going to be a major cost to repair, and it might be just easier to replace the engine or replace the piece of equipment. So that's why we start with a compression test, because that would be something that you would do relatively early in your diagnosis. At the very least, you pull over the engine and you see how it feels. And if it doesn't have much resistance against your hand, it likely has a compression issue. From there, we jump into some carburetor stuff. And the reason is because, like I said, 70, 80% of your problems are related to fuel systems. So that's super important. And then our hands-on changes over to like disassembling the engine, that type of thing. So if you're nervous about disassembling, taking apart a carburetor is a lot easier. And as far as like complexity of doing things, it's easier to physically do a compression test than it is to take apart a carburetor. And so that's why I phased it in this order. So we're wrapping up compression this week. Next week, we're getting into fuel system. And even today, we've already talked about air-fuel ratios. And as we kind of reviewed the 4-stroke cycle and 2-stroke cycle. We'll be talking about carburetors in class next week. And then the following week, we'll kind of finish up carburetors, and we'll talk about some other designs. We'll talk about the carburetors you're likely to see on two-stroke engines, and then we'll go into governors as well. And then after that, we're going to finish up with our ignition and electrical systems as we move through the information in our class. So I can't stress enough, if you need help getting a project, you at least want to get one engine that you can work on. And it's not even engine, like, it doesn't matter if you ever plan on putting it back together again. If you have an engine that you can take apart, and when you're all done, you could, put the parts on the shelf of your garage or whatever, that would be fine, because you can learn a lot just by taking something apart. So if you have one engine that you can take apart the engine, and you can take apart the carburetor on, let me get back to our home screen. If you can take apart the engine, take apart the carburetor, you can get a lot of your activities done from that, and learn a lot from it. And even if the engine doesn't run, you could still go through the process of that compression test as well. Okay, so compression test, carburetor, taking apart an engine, those are our three like big hands-on things that I love to have you guys do. And again, reach out to me if you need help getting those parts. So that's it for today. I've kind of run a little bit longer than I wanted to, but we got through some good stuff. Hopefully you're feeling better about the parts and pieces of the engine and the cycles of the engine. Any questions while I have you guys here? Yeah.
Professor, can you hear me?
Yep. Gotcha.
Okay. I have, can you see my project?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to take this apart and label it. And I have this chainsaw I'd like to try to get working.
Okay. That's perfect.
Okay.
That's perfect. What kind of chainsaw is that? Is it a
Toulon?
What is it?
Toulon?
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And if I figured if I can't get it running, then I was going to go buy something at the flea market and get it to run better.
No, that's perfect.
Okay.
With that brand of chainsaw, sometimes it's hard to find parts for that stuff, but yeah, everything that we're talking about in class will line up with that stuff.
Okay.
So Tim, a quick tip on your chainsaw there is if you pick it up by the pull, the pull starter,
Yeah,
it should be able to hold the weight of the saw pretty readily. So if it kind of slips, okay. Does it hold it for a second?
Yeah.
All right. So
feels like it has compression.
Yeah, so I would say the compression is probably so-so. A real tight one with a lot of compression, it won't fall down on the string so fast, right?
Okay.
An engine with some hours on it does exactly what your engine did. And an engine where you pull it and it just, boom, falls down right away, has no compression anymore. So that's the quickie compression test that you can use for like chainsaws and string trimmers or weed eaters, is they should just about be able to support their weight from their compression. So both of those are perfect. I bet if that chainsaw is not running, it's probably related to a fuel system issue. Okay. But yeah, those will work absolutely great for class. So if I change our screen share over here to discussions, I do have a tech help right here thing as well. And you can post some stuff on there. And I see I got a couple I got to catch up on. We got some of these guys fixed on the portal logins, but like if you have an engine issue, put it on the tech help. And even if I miss it, if you guys have some ideas, you guys should be able to share ideas on there as well. But we can get you going in the right direction. And if nothing else, if you get stuck, we can set up a time for you to swing by the college and I can help you look at it and get you going in the right direction. Okay.
So I can go ahead and start taking this mower apart and labeling it now?
Yep. Yeah, you could do it now. I have the video clips and stuff listed up, and I would do it sooner than later, so that if you run into a problem, and you get stuck and you need my help, that we got plenty of time to get you helped. for example, on that mower that you have, probably the thing that will be the biggest pain for you is getting the lawnmower blade off of the end of the engine, because it's down there cutting the grass. It's in like a wet, humid environment. It tends to rust on the end of the crankshaft. So getting that darn lawnmower blade off of there, and not just the blade, but the little hub that mounts the blade to the end of the crankshaft, that's one of the things that's the most pain on working on lawnmowers. And even in my video, what I had to do was actually cut that piece off of there because it was so rusted on. I couldn't use a puller to get it off. So anyways, yeah, start doing it now. That gives you some time if you run into problems. Great job,
I have
Tim.
one last thing.
Yeah.
I'm still not on the Stihl site, so I have one assignment that's late.
Okay, well, I'll fix that. I'll fix that right after class today. I'll make a note to myself here to check and make sure we get you going, and I'll email you all that info. What Stihl does on their new site, the old site, I used to be able to say, hey, here's your login, here's your password. The new site is set up so that when I put you in, they're supposed to email you like a welcome to Stihl email. And from there, you can click the link and set up your own password. And then your email address is your login. So I will go in there and make sure that I put you in there, and two, if you are in there, that the email's right, and then I get it to resend that info to you. Okay.
Thank you, Professor French.
No problem. Okay, guys, great job out there. Thank you for being with me today. Again, email me if you have questions on anything, and I look forward to seeing your projects. Okay. As you get in there and you start taking these things apart, you will run into problems, but that's where we get all that good learning from. Really, it's figuring out how to overcome those issues that you'll encounter where you'll do the most learning. So, all right, everybody, thank you so much. We'll catch you next week. Okay.
Bye.
All right, bye, everybody. Bye, Eric.